Today's topic is there more than one way to be a good person? And let's understand where this question is coming from, right? We've spoken about previous weeks, we've spoken about certain foundational principles within Judaism, right? We spoke about the concept of God. We spoke about why believe God gave the Torah to the Jewish people. We spoke about the oral tradition within Judaism and the authenticity and legitimacy of the oral tradition within Judaism and what that means, what it's all about. We spoke about the concept of pluralism in Judaism, and now we're going to talk about the concept of morality, essentially, is what we're going to get to today. Is there more than one way to be a good person? And this comes down to a conversation about morality, of moral relativism versus objective morality. We're going to talk about that, all that stuff today. And so I think we first need to, though, be good Jews and answer a question with a question. We start off by saying, isn't it enough to just be a good person? Is there really, or isn't there more than one way to be a good person? We have to answer that question with a question, right? Which is, well, what do we mean by good? What do we mean by good? So we have to understand really what we mean by morality, right? We have to define what we mean by morality. I believe if you look, I forget which dictionary, but if you look in the dictionary, you're going to see the definition of morality is going to be something along the lines of a system for evaluating behavior as good or evil, as right or wrong. And I think there are two ways to do this, right? Let's just say that definition again. That morality is a system for evaluating behavior as good or evil, as right or wrong, okay? So there are two ways you can do this. Now, either something is right or wrong because people say so, or something is right and wrong because God says so. Now, if it's God, so okay, it's easy. What God says is good, what God says is bad. God's the ultimate authority, beyond all, creates all's happening within the infinite. That's the easy one. What about when people say so, right? Because if there's no God, so then I guess you could say that man determines what's good or evil. And here's the thing, though. Is man known to change his mind from time to time? Of course, the answer to that question is yes, right? Certainly we know man is known to change his mind from time to time. For example, the Western world's ancestors, sociological ancestors, would be the Roman Empire. And the Roman Empire, they used to have this thing called sports, which involved watching the lions duel with the gladiators, ultimately culminating typically in the lions eating the gladiators, right? Now, of course, nowadays, everyone would say, oh, that's wrong, right? That's wrong. You shouldn't go. You're going to watch this blood sport where animals are going to rip apart people. That's horrible. But back then, if you were around 2,000 years ago, you, or at least certainly your non-Jewish neighbors, would be lining up around the street in order to get into the amphitheater to watch the gladiators hack each other to bits, to watch the lions chomp up on the gladiators. And absolutely, who is the Roman philosopher who stormed out against it? That is right, nobody. Because it was a perfectly fine thing to do. Family-filled, wholesome, fun entertainment, no problem, right? But now, fast forward 2,000 years later, and everybody knows that's wrong. That's murder. That's a horrible thing, right? By the way, another good example, we won't go into this, but it's just to make the point. Another good example is abortion, right? People, and this isn't to get into a conversation, right or wrong. That's not the point here. The point is that the argument 60 years ago, it was societal consensus. 60, 70 years ago, societal consensus. How can you take away this other human being's right to life? Fast forward 70 years later, societal consensus. How can you take away a woman's right to choose, right? So 70 years ago, societal consensus, this is murder. 70 years later, nowadays, majority, society consensus, again, how can you take away a woman's right to choose? So what this shows us, the point again isn't to get into the abortion conversation. The point is to say, hold on a second. Is it something, is it murder, or is it 1,000%? Is it something that's totally fine thing to do, right? Is it good or is it evil? Or does it depend on what day you ask me? On Monday, societal consensus, that is totally fine. But on Tuesday, murder. So does it just simply depend on, the conditions haven't changed. The only thing that's changed is the time. So this is the issue at hand. Now, again, what causes the human being to change their minds from time to time? So obviously, I think it's clear that it's, whatever the human being, or whatever the society wants, whatever they feel like doing at the time when they're evaluating, right? And so the thing is, though, that if we go back to what we mean by morality, right? Remember, we define morality as a system for evaluating behavior as good or evil, as right or wrong. And so if that's the case, right, that means that you have a system by which you can plug into that system whatever the behavior is, with all the factors and the conditions around it. And then based on that system, the system will tell you whether this is a good thing or whether this is an evil thing, right? The problem is that if you're using your behavior to determine what's good or evil, you no longer have a system for evaluating behavior, because your behaviors become the determinant, not the system. And this is the issue at hand. A good example of this, a good parable of this is an old Hasidic tale of a king walking through a forest with a bunch of his soldiers. And all of a sudden they start seeing all over the place a bunch of bullseyes. Someone had been through and shot bullseyes all over the place into the different trees. And the king gets very excited about this. He's like, wow, this is an amazing archer. And he sends out his soldiers to search out the forest. He says, find me this archer and bring him to me. So a few hours later, sure enough, the soldiers do reappear, come back to the king with this archer. And the king is very pumped up. He says to the archer, wow, this is amazing. Well, I will pay you any amount of money to teach my men to shoot like you shoot. And the archer is like, no, it's no big deal. The king's like, what do you mean? A skill like this must have taken years to perfect. And he says, no. I can teach them 1, 2, 3, no problem. See, here's what I do. I take my arrow, I put it in the bow. I shoot the arrow, and if I hit the tree, I pick up my bucket of paint and I walk over to the tree and I paint a target around the arrow. This is the absurdity of a morality that's determined by people, right? They have their arrow and they have their paint and they shoot the arrow, they do the behavior, right? And they have their paint, they have their philosophy around the behavior. And then no problem, if the shooting veers off, if the behavior veers off a little bit, after a while, no problem, we'll paint a new target around that. We'll bring up a new philosophy. So this is what happens. And what it means to tell us is that if there is no system independent from what human beings, humanity, society think or feel about it, then you don't have morality. You don't have, by definition, a system for evaluating behavior as good or evil, as right or wrong, right? So it's not that it's objective morality versus relative morality. It's that if it's not objective, it's not morality, right? It's not a system that's independent of what you think about it, right? And so here's the thing, though, despite all this, people feel that they are a good person, right? Well, let's take a look at that a little bit, right? Think about it. Name something that is so evil that you don't need the Torah to tell you not to do it. So a bunch of things that typically people mention: murder, rape, theft, all sorts of things. But that just furthers the point that I'm trying to share, which is there is nothing that is so evil that you can't find entire, whole, quote unquote, intelligent societies telling you that it's a perfectly fine thing to do. Again, we just shared that idea about the Romans and their form of entertainment, right? Germans, that's an easy cheap shot, but that's an obvious one, right? Look at the Chinese, right? Kill it. You have the wrong kind of kid, or you have too many, you're going to kill that kid, right? When it comes to theft, I mean, the Native Americans believe that all property is theft. Who are you to take all of humanity's land and declare it your own? All property is theft, according to them at least, right? And so nevertheless, people feel that they're more than feel, they're kind of sure that they are, that they are good, right? That they are good, right? That they're closer to the mother, to that, people feel that they're good. So the thing is, what do people mean? People mean, when they're saying that they're good, is they feel bad when they do something that's wrong, but they keep doing a bunch of things that society says is totally fine, pats them on the back, and that makes them feel nice and tingly inside. But the problem with that is that the Nazi, as well as others, had a completely different society patting him on the back, telling him he's, holding in a good place, telling he's doing something good, he's doing the right thing, he's in it for the greater good, right? And what it comes to show us a lot of the times is that what I think is me is overwhelmingly due to the influence of our society, parents, conditioning, nature, nurture, all that stuff, right? And so we have to recognize that when we talk about these, progress, quote unquote, firstly, most of the things that progress is talking about typically is actually things that we've seen already thousands of years ago. So there's nothing really new going on, FYI. By the way, progress doesn't mean just that things are getting better. It could mean progress could mean things are getting better. Progress could also mean things are getting later. Ever heard of a progressive disease, right? So when people are like, yeah, it's modern times, we spoke about last week, right? It's modern times now, right? Again, there's never been a time in history that weren't modern times, right? So we should recognize the fallacy of these conversations and these semi-arguments. But often what we're finding is that society pulls our strings, right? And then a lot of times we'll think we're making decisions, right? I mean, you see it now, usually with advertisers, you see it, in Hollywood and the shows and this and that, right? Things that are assumed to be okay, things that are assumed to be beyond the pale, right? It's easier to see now than ever, especially if you're not growing up in it, right? If you're 12 years old, so you're all wrapped up in it. But if you're, a couple of decades older, hopefully you can see what's going on. I don't know. But anyway, the point is that, right, this whole idea, this notion of being a good person and having it be an important factor in your life in the first place, meaning that the fact that we even have this topic, isn't it good enough to be a good person? Well, who cares if we're a good person, right? Even that, by the way, we can say is from the success of the Jewish mission, right? That today, to say that a person who's not a religious person is going to go to the stadium to watch two gladiators kill each other, that's false, because everyone, quote unquote, knows that's wrong. By the way, who knows what it'll be. But up until now, I think it's fair to say everyone knows that's wrong, right? Well, think about it. How does everyone know that that's wrong? How is that so, quote unquote, natural and obvious to know that that's wrong? Certainly, it's not natural and obvious. Look, 2,000 years ago, that's what the masses were doing. So what changed? Right? The idea is that success of the Jews in getting their ideas across about Torah, about mitzvot, about good, about evil, about the value of a human being, about the infinite value and preciousness of a soul, the godly nature of a soul. Those ideas were spread, not just by the Jews, right? They were spread by other, break-offs and branch-offs and things that became their own religions and the like. And they kind of imposed those ideas, to be fair. They imposed those ideas on the Jews about what is good and what is evil and into the world. And now the world is more in tune with the Torah view of good and evil and the value of a human being than it was 2,000 years ago. And this is clearly what history shows us. Yet people ignore this reason of how we got to where we are, and just accept that their views on good and evil are just simply natural and obvious. Clearly, history shows us it's not natural and obvious. History shows us natural and obvious is very different. But nevertheless, they'll believe their ideas to be natural and obvious. And so, therefore, what do I need the Torah to tell me this for? Everyone picks it up on their own. But of course, again, history testifies that that's not what happened. It didn't work that way, right? And so we get back to the question: who determines what's good? Is it man or is it God, right? So if it's man, it's just simply what people want to do. Ethicists, by the way, determine what's ethical by surveying people and asking them what they feel is moral or immoral. So again, even there, the whole concept is based on where people are at. It's not based on something being objectively right or wrong, right? And so the thing is, though, of course, people still do say that you ought not kill, you ought not steal, but that's for a couple of different reasons that will show kind of fall short of what we're really looking for in terms of morality, right? Right. After all, people will say that we ought not kill, we ought not steal. Why? Because it's not about necessarily the inherent intrinsic goodness of it as much as it's about self-interest, right? If I don't want to be killed and I don't want to be stolen from, so we ought to say that you ought not kill, you ought to not steal. It's not right to kill, it's not right to steal, right? But that's not morality because it's intrinsically good. That's just self-interest, right? Another idea that people sometimes like to bring up is the worth of the thing, right? However I should treat something depending on the value that I give it, right? So like, let's say, I can't kill a person, but I can kill a cow to eat a hamburger, but I can't have a person burger, right? Well, here's the thing, why not? Again, in a non-God system, if we're not believing in God, we're not believing in the intrinsic sanctity of a human being, or dignity of a human being, soul of a human being. So then where is my system to say that humans are more valuable than animals, right? After all, if there is no God, and he didn't give the Torah, right? Then we're all a bunch of conglomerations of molecules and all sorts of organic compounds and this and that, and we're walking, talking cockroaches, essentially, right? By the way, tangent, this is also why you'll find a lot of times the opposite as well, right? When they elevate the status of animals to treat animals the way we treat humans, you'll find that that society will start treating humans expendable and like animals, right? First society to come up with animal rights in recent history was Germany in 1919, right? So, so anyway, we have to recognize that what we're talking about when we deal with morality is, like we started with, the definition of morality is a system for evaluating behavior as good or evil, as right or wrong. And if we drop that reality, so then we know if we drop that, so then if we put that aside, we no longer have a objective standard independent of what human beings think about it in any particular moment in any particular society, right? And this is one thing that's very dangerous about the world that wants to talk about there is no truth and all of that kind of stuff. Or I'll define things the way I want to define them. It doesn't matter what independent, objective concepts or standards there are, right? When we begin down this path, right? So we understand that it's not a matter. We're not moving in a world of morality. We're not moving in a world of what's right, because the whole concept of morality is that it's independent of what we feel about it, independent of what the movements, the tides, the winds of change of society, right? And if we want to get Jewish, it means getting laser focused in a society in which we have today. It means, and where things are moving today, it means getting laser focused on that and detaching myself a little bit, from unhooking myself, uncoupling myself from media, from Hollywood, from the celebrities, from the athletes, from all the different things that they're saying and they're preaching, detaching from that and saying, okay, again, what in my life, if I'm going to be living my life, I want to leave that to the utmost. I want to live that to the utmost. And so if I want to live that to the utmost, I want to go on a search for truth. I want to clarify what is reality and what is my place in it. And that means going on a real search. And in the times that we're living now, it might be a little bit of a lonely road, the truth is. I mean, there are people to walk that road with you, but you're going to find that there are those who will shun that, right? And the funny thing is, you'll find it's the crowd that says, that talks about, being open and live the way you want to live, and whatever. You'll find that they'll be the first ones. So, but this is what is required, and this is sometimes, we have in life. Our forefather Abraham. This is what he was about, right? One of the reasons why it's called the Hebrew is from the word in Hebrew, ivri, which means, also from the word aver, which means on the other side, because the entire world was on one side in terms of their belief, and he stood strong on the other side. And so he was a revolutionary, and that's really the nature of the Jew. The nature of the Jew, the nature of each of us, is to be a revolutionary, is to be the ultimate rebel, but not rebel without a cause, a rebel with the ultimate cause, right? And when we start living in that way and strengthening ourselves to follow our spiritual convictions, to search for truth, to live in a way that is strong and moral, when we have clarity on which direction we're supposed to be going in. So then we're living out our spiritual genetics, right? That's what we're made of. That is exactly what we're made of. And so when someone asks you, hey man, isn't it enough to be a good person? Of course, in Judaism, our answer is yes, it is enough to be a good person. Now, wouldn't it be worthwhile to figure out what that means, how do we define that? What does that look like, right? Because if we understand everything that we've explained here over the last couple of weeks, if we understand that the concept that there's a God who gave the Torah to the Jewish people, so then, and that's the ultimate, and the ultimate is that we want to build a relationship with the infinite. So then we have already defined by default what we mean by good and what we mean by evil. Everything, that which is going to connect us and the world to the infinite is going to be good. That which is going to disconnect us and the world from the infinite is going to be evil, is going to be bad. And so if the Torah is coming out to delineate that, so then that is going to be the definition, right? And so when someone says, hey, isn't it enough for us to be a good person? Of course, our answer as Jews is yes. Now would you like to know what that looks like and how we go ahead and live it? Right? So my friends, I hope this is meaningful. I hope this teaching strikes a chord. We're going to call a little bit early today. But I thank you for joining. I thank you for tuning in. I hope this is helpful. I hope this brings about some clarity and some understanding. My friends, tune in again next time for this wonderful class. See you then.